like I said, my capstone project when I finished my bachelor's was on the shortage, and a huge reason we're dealing with the shortage right now is in part because of the 1,500-hour rule. It was sort of it was a knee-jerk reaction by the FAA after the Colgan air crash in like 2009, right?
Welcome to the Bravo Lima Podcast. Skies are clear and comms are open. This is episode 3.
Welcome back. Wow, what a great podcast. I just love Morgan.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts about the podcast was her talking about her experience as she started gaining followers as she was going through Blue Line's program. And it's interesting hearing what that experience was like for her. But even just in general, you get to meet Morgan as a pilot, as a person, rather than just the comical character that she is behind, reels and TikToks and stuff.
Yeah, I think my favorite was going back down memory lane of the first time I met her and her, just being who she is still today. And now she has all these followers and, she can walk down the street in OshKosh and there's 20 people asking for her picture, people coming to our booth asking where she is. Like we have an Apple tracker on her or something. But no, I think that was probably my favorite part, just remembering when she was a student here and then remembering what it was like to watch her gain followers and really, find her passion in that sort of little niche area of aviation as well.
And that being said, well, let's go ahead and bring her on. Morgan, welcome to episode 3 of the Bravo Lima Podcast.
3. I don't know what that was. Hey guys, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. This is gonna be standard throughout the whole thing. I'm just gonna hiccup. We're gonna trip through the entire podcast.
So how you doing?
Okay. Great. So the cats are also gonna be a distraction.
It's okay. It's okay. Goose is a distraction for me right now. Sometimes if you guys ever see me not looking at the camera or like follow, it's because Goose is just on a hunt for crumbs.
We have the door open and it's finally cold here, so the cats are like frisky, so they like zoomies across the apartment.
I mean, Morgan, it's unfortunate that this podcast has already started off with you talking about how you have cats, so you just probably lost half your followers. But we'll continue the podcast anyways. So let the people know who you are. Anybody that are not aware of your reels and your TikToks and your chaos and funniness that you have, what would you tell them about yourself?
Before you do that, Morgan, I need to be clear. If you don't know Morgan's reels and TikToks, or if you don't follow her on social, we're going to put it right here because you need to go watch those reels and then come back to this because she is freaking hilarious. So you need to know what type of humor we're dealing with before you watch this podcast.
Chaotic energy is about the theme of my life and my humor. So
well, that being said, so like if you were going to let everybody know, like you had to give them just a general understanding of who Morgan is, what would you tell them?
So I'm on Instagram at Le Capitan Morgan. So that's how I envisioned it when I first made it. I made it before I started making content, and I was looking for handles. It was like Le Captain Morgan or Captain Morgan. Of course, that's taken by 800 people. I was like, well, let's make it French. I was like Le Capitan. So that's how I sounded in my head, and I was like, that seems stupid. Let's roll with it. So anyway, I found myself at Blue Line in July 2021 and graduated January 2022. Just tore through all my ratings. You guys got me. I had my private in 2018. You guys got me the rest of the way there, and now I'm flying pipeline. So,
how long did it take you to get your private?
So I started flying in 2016. My dad had a 120, and I was flying that. It's a little tail dragger. The thing was so squirrely, and starting with zero time, I mean, maybe a couple hours because I flew with him as a kid. And so starting in that was a little bit rough, but then I didn't solo in it because my dad let his buddy fly it and he landed it in mud, which wasn't a problem, but he hit the throttle and the prop dug into the mud. And so they had a prop strike and then jacked up the rudder somehow. So when I went to fly it, we were like, what happened to the rudder? We didn't even know there was a prop strike because it started up fine. And then later on we found out that some things went down that should not have gone down or should have been communicated at least. And so anyway, I had 20 hours, didn't solo, and then probably didn't pick it up for another year, 6 months to a year. So all in all, it took me about 2 years. So I started in 2016 and then I got my private in 2018.
So it took you 2 years to get your private and then it took you 6 months to get
Yes.
the remaining instrument, commercial, CFI, CFII, multi, all those. Wow.
So a quarter of your time for private, you were able to get 6 ratings. That's crazy.
Yeah. Exactly. Also, I want to add that was the draw to Blue Line. I'm not a particularly driven person if I'm left to my own devices. And I was going to get my instrument sort of in the middle of COVID and then before COVID, and then COVID happened, and I lived probably over an hour away from the airport that I was going to get my instrument in. And between work and wanting to have a social life and the drive up there, I was like, no, I don't. This is a not great situation for me, and I just couldn't make it happen. I just wasn't driven enough. So I was like, if I want to succeed, like, I need to fully commit to flight school from start to finish. I don't want to work. I don't want to have to worry about anything else. I want to be fully immersed in flight school and studying and flying and nothing else.
So how did you find Blue Line?
Andy.
Did you really?
You didn't know that?
I did.
I didn't know that.
I asked that on purpose. I knew where she found.
Oh, that
Blue
is
Line.
so weird. I don't know. I actually did not know that you found me because I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Cool.
Dude, my life changed. I found the YouTube video, the ATP versus Blue Line, and like literally 3 days. It took me 3 days to decide because I looked at ATP. I had an ATP maybe like 30 minutes from me, and everyone I talked to had nothing but bad things to say. Who started at ATP, and he went and got a CFI somewhere else because their CFI academy was backed up by like 3 months. So instead of the program taking like 7 to 9 months or whatever their timeline is, it takes closer to 11, 12. It's like, well, what's the point of an accelerated program if that's what the timeline looks like?
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny too because earlier you brought up about like, you know, the whole discipline thing about how like you're like, I just don't have the discipline to just do it by myself. I mean, what better way to immerse yourself in the nation's most, you went for it. You went for the nation's most efficient program. And it is, as I'm sure you can say, is a very stressful environment to be in.
It was, but it was worth it. Like, there's nothing else on your plate. You don't have to worry about any other external factors. I mean, yeah, my family, I came to North Carolina from Texas, and, that was my game plan. I wasn't going to move to North Carolina. It was just a temporary, planning on being there for no more than 6 months, and then planning on being home. So other than, maybe family factors and stuff, nothing else was on my plate. So yes, it's stressful, but you're able to focus all your time and energy towards flying and getting your ratings.
We'll get into this later, but we'll talk about how we're mad at you for not staying in North Carolina. But
I know, I was just about to say, you can't, I still remember the day that Morgan showed up. I remember walking, because we were still at RDU, and I remember walking from the back, of my office to the front because I heard something which I thought was like an emergency, when in reality it was just Morgan's voice and her laughter, which I'm sure you can capture from this. But it's infectious. It wasn't like scary. It was infectious. So I wanted to know what was going on because I sort of have a cackle too, but nobody can beat Morgan. So I remember that day, and like, how dare you? You know what I mean? How dare you come and make us all fall in love with you and then say I'm not working here because I have family? Are you kidding me?
I know. Where's your priorities right now? I remember, it's funny, whenever I would have to go look for you, Morgan, I remember going downstairs, which if any of you guys haven't been in Blue Line's facility.
What are you doing, first of all?
What? It's like a square is the best way to explain it. So what you'll do is we'll go down the stairs and I'll be split. I have 2 ways to go. And if I was looking for Morgan, all I'd do is I'd come out the door and I'd just stop and I would just listen.
You just know.
And then I would listen for her and I would know where she was from that. So you could always hear where Morgan was.
There's one day you came in and you were looking for me, and it was in the morning, and I was eating. I was in the middle of eating breakfast in one of the rooms, and you had come and like popped your head in the room, and you were like, I couldn't find you. It was so quiet, and I've got like a mouthful.
That's so funny.
So Morgan, we ask all of our guests, what was your most memorable flight at Blue Line when you were a student?
I'm probably gonna have to say spin training. I have the tendency to get airsick.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but I had a couple of rough flights where I got a little bit airsick, and it was typically doing like steep turns over and over and over. So I was a little bit nervous that I was gonna have a bad time. I never thrown up in the plane. I will say that much. I never threw up, but I always, not always, but occasionally I got a little bit sick. So I was really nervous that I was gonna get sick and like potentially throw up. But I didn't, and it ended up. I just remember the first. They do the incipient spin. You start with that one, and and everyone had said, like, oh, the 172 doesn't want to spin. I'm like, oh, cool. So my thinking was that, like, oh, you really, like, have to make it spin. No, you don't. It will spin easily, okay, as long as you get the rudder in there. Like, I thought it was going to have to force it over. No, he started it. He showed me, what he was doing, and he kicked the rudder in and just, whoa! I was like, no!
So I didn't catch that. So did you get sick on any spin flights?
No, I didn't, thankfully. And it was really cool. It was, let's see, I finished in January, so that was probably November, December, and it was a really cool morning. So thankfully, and that's a big factor for me is the heat. So it was nice and and it didn't bother me, thankfully, or else I would have had a bad time.
So did you say that you've never gotten sick on any flights at Blue Line? Like you've never thrown up?
I've never thrown up, but I have gotten sick, and I've had to sit back and be like, okay, I need a minute. We're going to go, straight and level, and we're going to work this out.
Who were you flying with at OshKosh?
OshKosh, it was Go Easy Aerobatics with Kyle Fowler.
Did you get sick with them?
Later, I did.
I remember that was the first thing I asked her. She came back, and I was like, did you get sick?
I was so worried I was going to get sick. I brought the puke bag with me. And there's I did a reel after I did it, and it's me like blowing up the puke bag. I'm like, I'm ready. Bring it. And initially, no, I didn't get sick. And I think positive G's don't have as much as an effect as negative G's. So the first, over half the flight, most of the flight was fine. And we were doing, I think it was a reverse Cuban where you pull up, flip it over, and then you come back out. And anyway, so we had what?
I could hear your cats in the background.
I might have to throw them in the other room. Callie went in the room.
No, it's fine. It just made me laugh. I was just laughing.
Oh, yeah.
It just sounded like something died in the background. That's all.
Yeah, it was like.
Oh, it's difficult. Okay, so I'll do it with my hand. So the reverse Cuban, you come up, flip over, and then come back around. So he did the first two, and he asked me if I wanted to fly it. I'm like, let's do it. So I went for it, flipped it over, and we started coming back around, and we're over a lake somewhere, outside of OshKosh, and it was so beautiful. But I just remember coming back around and then just looking up out of, because it's like a bubble canopy, looking up and just seeing water, and I pushed the nose forward instead of pulling to bring it out of the dive. And he was like, no. He was like, pull. I was like, push? No, pull. Push. I'm just gonna push it.
You're like, but it's so beautiful.
I don't want to go towards the water. We want to go away from the water.
Do you remember that reel we did? I don't know what it's from, but the noise, it's like we're not speaking actual English or something, but it's like Zubaboo, boo, and then you dove the plane. Do you remember that one?
Oh no, it was the Friends episode. Is it Je?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. You did that in real life.
And so it was enough to where we both lifted up out of the seats, and so he took it from me and got us back level, and I sort of sat there. I think it's happening.
So how do you do in your current role? I mean, you're flying the pipeline in Texas heat all day long, low to the ground. I can only imagine that would make you feel sick.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've thrown up anymore. It's been several, and it's horrible every time.
She doesn't even have to diet. She just
How does your co-pilot feel about it?
He's used to it. They're all used to it, just because all the observers. Because I sit in the back of a tail.
How do you get used to that?
It's sick.
I would not.
I don't know, and if I smell throw up or something, and obviously we're in close quarters.
Ashley, your face.
No. Okay, this is gross, but Lake had a stomach virus this week.
Oh no.
Like, I think I need to go back to our wedding a year ago and take out, well, I'm there for you in sickness, but not this sickness. I don't do that. Like, he was quarantined to his own room. Like, he's left to his, I'm sorry, but I would never be able to get used to it.
You just need to get rich enough where you can outsource someone else to take care of him.
Hire somebody to come take care of when he has a stomach virus.
Just be like, cool, you're your temporary wife right now.
I'm just gonna hire those pilots that she flies with because apparently they're fine with it.
They can just handle it.
They down.
So Morgan, okay, when you came into Blue Line's program, you had like a handful of followers. It wasn't anything crazy, right? Like you were still in the hundreds. Am I not right?
Oh yeah, I think I had maybe like 600 or 700s, and honestly, they were all friends. Like it was my own personal account. I wasn't making content. I was just posting life stuff and like updates. But that was it. There was no kind of content creation. That wasn't my goal.
Yeah, and what started it then? Like because it was out of nowhere, right? It was in the midst of you being at Blue Line that you just decided to start creating content.
I guess it started in the middle of my instrument training while I was flying with Jacob was my instructor. And I just remember like telling him, I'm like, okay, I feel a little weird telling you this, but I'm going to film some stuff. I kind of want to start making content, but like I hate it because the idea of like everyone walking around with like a camera and just like filming everything and like filming yourself, I'm like, ugh. So I didn't like that. So I just gave him a heads up. I was like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to film some stuff. Like I kind of want to make content. So I hope this isn't weird. He was like, go for it. I'm like, great. Okay. And I just started making content. But the original content, I think my first reel was me doing like a pre-flight of the Cessna because we were flying the Cessna for instrument at that point. And I just filmed a pre-flight. And then the next one was, I think in my commercial training or I think it was just a bunch of videos put together just of like different flights and stuff. And that one, the first several didn't do great. And I sat there and thought about it. I'm like, there's tons of people who make aviation content who also, may I add, make really good aviation content. Like nice cameras, they got GoPros, and they got like nice everything. And they know how to edit and put everything together. And I thought about it. I was like, this isn't, like, it's okay. Like, it's, content.
Did it seem like a bridge too far?
A little bit, I guess. I mean, it was completely new for me. And then I think I did a couple of funny ones because I thought about it. I was like, why don't you just lean into what you love? And I love to laugh. And why not just roll with that? And no one was really making any kind of funny aviation content. Everyone was, I fly jets. And I fly.
Right.
Kind of
super serious stuff.
Yeah, very like we're all very professional here. I'm like, I'm not. Let's go.
Oh,
so,
Morgan.
off with comedy, and then my first reel that went viral was that I had split up audio from The Office, and I was, oh my god, it's happening! It's happening!
Yep.
Okay.
Was that your big? So was that the first one that went big for you?
It was, and all it was, I had the camera like over here by my head and just filming, obviously out of the front and just doing a steep turn.
Yeah, your face wasn't even in it.
Right, no. That's why it went viral.
You're like, wait, maybe that's why I've lost followers recently.
That's funny because first we talked about you having cats and your face is showing on this podcast. So man, we're killing it right now. When did it click for you? When did it click that you were like, man, this is really picking up steam and people are really starting to like know who I am now because of this?
I think I had a few videos go viral over the course of, I don't know, 2 months or so, 3 months, give or take. And just watching the follower count whenever they would go viral. So at some point, I think whenever you hit, 100 likes, follows, and like comments, Instagram like tops out at that. And I remember waking up one day and seeing it was 100 likes and 100 followers overnight. And I was like, is this happening? I'm like, this is weird. And then I broke.
Am I like a big deal?
Am I important now? 3,000 followers, then 5,000, and then 10,000. I was like, this is wild. And I just enjoyed making content and enjoyed making people laugh. And honestly, what I originally was not planning on doing, but why I wanted to make content was just for networking, right? The aviation,
Right.
It's a very small community. Everybody knows everybody. And like, if I have an online presence, I feel like it makes me, maybe more hireable. Like, you know what you're getting whenever you see me. There's really not much difference between what I post on Instagram and me. So
Right.
yeah, originally for networking and just meeting people and meeting people in the aviation community and hoping that maybe one day it helps me get a job.
I'm sure it will. I mean, I remember like a couple things come to mind. I remember talking to a prospective student on the phone, and she said, yeah, I follow this girl named Morgan, talks about career in aviation and all that. So it kind of hit me then, like, prospective students are starting to follow her and know after her experience, this is what I want to do. And then we went to, I think it was Sun and Fun first, where, hey, is Morgan here? Is Morgan here? Excuse me. Nice plane, but is Morgan here? and I was like, no, she's not. And they were like, well, we saw Blue Line in the back of the picture she posted earlier today. So do you know when she's going to come? So I would have to constantly be texting Morgan, like, you are requested at the booth. And then at OshKosh, it was obviously an even bigger deal where we did meetups and everything. So
OshKosh was the big one for me.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I don't remember what happened, but they knew that you were at our booth for some reason.
yeah, because at that point, she had started posting, I'm having a meetup at Blue Line Aviation and like all that.
And then I remember a couple approaching me and being like, the girl, I swear she almost had tears in her eyes. She was like, here's how they approached us, was like, hey, we heard that Morgan's here. Is that true? And I said, yes. And it seemed at that point that her eyes seemed to get a little watery and she was like, oh my God, like, where is she at? And I think you had just left. You had just walked away with a friend. And I was like, she went that way.
And they like take off running.
And
like,
they literally did. They left. They just went
they
to go
bring out
find
the
you.
bloodhounds to like smell your scent.
I was saying, I think I ran into that couple because I was coming back. Like, I had gone, I think, to meet Captain Joe, actually. He was having a meet and greet. So I was coming back from that, and then they walked past me, and they were like, Morgan! I was like, oh my God, hi!
I think what's really unique about you and why I think people go like crazy about influencers all the time, but specifically you, because you respond to everyone. I think that's so unique because like me and Morgan are friends, but we don't talk every day. But if I respond to her Instagram story, most likely within an hour, I have a response back from her, even if it's just a like of what I said.
Yeah.
And that's what people who call into our school say. Morgan responded to me. Morgan said this. Morgan said that. And there's so many influencers, even in aviation, that it's a lot. I mean, how many followers do you have now?
Yeah.
It gets tough and sometimes that's why I don't post on my stories, especially recently. Just I haven't been making as much content probably the last several months just because I'm not at the airport every day like I was. But I'm also not posting on my stories a ton just because, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but I do get a lot of messages and
Right.
And it sometimes gets a little bit overwhelming, but I want to try to talk to everybody. And sometimes the messages like slip through the cracks and I feel really bad about that. But yeah, if someone has like a question for me, especially if they're asking advice for, getting into aviation or making a career out of aviation, going into a flight school, I want to answer those questions. Like it's, like you said, not everyone wants to answer all their messages because it does get overwhelming, but so many people have questions and I feel like I don't know everything, but I've got some answers and I really want to pass on that information. So
you know how we know that you answer every comment on every post that you make? It's because when we have a post with you, with Blue Line, I'll wake up in the morning and my notifications are, Le Captain Morgan has commented on a post that you're tagged in. Le Captain Morgan has commented on a post that you're tagged in. And it's just blown up. And it's like, and normally I'll go in there and as Blue Line, I'll respond for certain things, right? But if you already answered, and I'm like, all right, cool. Well, that's fine. So, and you got to think, right? Like Blue Line's had a couple viral posts ourselves. And I do my best to respond to
Shout
every...
out.
Shout out, right? We've had a couple that gone viral, and we respond to every comment as we possibly can. But you have continuous viral content, so I can't imagine like
I don't usually respond to the comments, but I still get them all, and it's like Captain Morgan, and it's somebody else will write back, and then within seconds you are responding back to their question. It's I don't know how you have enough time in your day. But going back to my first point was that's why people react the way they do when they see you, because you are so personable. There are so many influencers I have met at those air shows or other places. They're super nice, but it's not the same. And you are just like you just said, you are the person you are on social media and in person. So when when that couple you saw and they say, "Hey Morgan," you're like, "Hey," you don't know who they are, but they think they do. You make every single person feel like you care about, one, their training, two, their aviation goals, and three, who they are. And I think that's really unique.
Thank you.
Aww.
Oh, yeah.
So Morgan, talk to me about your time at Southwest. You were at Southwest before you came to Blue Line. What about that job made you want to become a pilot?
Deciding to go to flight school was probably the 10 years or so, the previous 10 years of being around, well, in the industry, first of all, but also growing up around it. My dad has been a pilot since the 80s. I think he got his private pilot's license in like 86. So I grew up flying with him, but it was one of those things that, like, if you grow up around it, it's normal. Like, well, kids don't grow up with a dad, who's got a plane and they just go fly. So I didn't appreciate it as a kid. And then anyway, going into Southwest, I was also finishing my degree in aeronautics. I wasn't sure what I wanted to study when I first went to college, and my dad is also an air traffic controller. He said, "Well, what about ATC?" Like, well, why not? I guess so. I don't know what else I'm going to do. So, my education, my formal education is in aviation as well. So, I don't know, it was a culmination of the past 10 years of being in aviation. And then I think just talking to all the pilots, and all of them loved it. I mean, there were days, obviously, like the meltdown they had December, and over Christmas. I worked through a few of those meltdowns, unfortunately. None of them occurred over Christmas, though. That was a disaster. But we've had a few of those meltdowns. But other than that, and some really rough passengers here and there, the pilots loved their jobs. They loved, obviously the pay is great. The flexibility is there. You're able to, first of all, you do get to bid on your days, but also the ability to trade. It's fairly easy to trade and pick up and give away days so you can do what you want with your life. So being in it, especially the last 3.5 years, I started off on the ramp, or 3.5 years on the ramp, and then 3.5 years as an operations agent. So as an operations agent, I was face to face with the crew and getting to talk to them. So I talked to them a lot, and all of them pretty much had the same thing to say. They love their job.
I'm curious, would you say that you chose to become a pilot because higher quality of life or a passion for flying?
Originally, higher quality of life. Honestly, I wouldn't say I had a passion for it, especially not at first. It was one of those things where I was an operations agent in the middle of COVID, and initially, things slowed down, and it was what it was. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And then when things picked back up, that's when it got bad. People got all kinds of crazy with the masks and every kind of issue. But even things that weren't issues before, they were just, not great situations, but it wasn't bad. People took them to a whole different level after COVID. It was like the smallest thing set anybody off. So
you're saying that essentially the smallest things got exaggerated post-COVID or during COVID as well?
Yeah. Some things that would be a minor issue after COVID turn into huge issues.
So you snapped and was like, that's it, I'm becoming a pilot.
And I knew there was a shortage, so I finished my capstone project for my bachelor's degree was on the pilot shortage, and that was in 2019. I wrote it in October, or finished it October 2019. And there was a shortage before COVID even happened, and then COVID happened and made it just so much worse. Initially, we went from a shortage to a surplus in a week, and because of all the early retirement packages and all kinds of benefits that the airlines offered their pilots to basically leave or retire, all those people left, and now they needed all of them back. So yeah, so it got even worse. And honestly, that's the train that I decided I wanted to jump on, considering it was worse than it ever had been. So yeah, that was my thinking, was just quality of life and passion. So no, initially it wasn't a passion, but then I set out on my own path. Like I said, I grew up flying with my dad, and it was okay, it was cool, but I didn't have a huge passion for it. I wasn't like, yes, this is where I want my career to be. Like, let's go for it.
So when you say that you were flying with your dad, what does that mean? Were you flying like in general aviation, like your dad is on plane kind of thing? What does that mean?
Yes. So yeah, he had his own. Well, initially when I was younger, he just rented planes. So we would just go rent a 172 and go fly around. But later on, he bought a little Piper Cub, and then later on he got a Citabria. So yeah, it was all.
Was that your first plane? Your first plane flying in was a Piper Cub?
It may. Well, that was when I was 16. So previous to that, I think we were flying Cessna 172s, 152s.
Oh, okay. I wanted to bring that up earlier too, because you said you did your spin training, and I wanted to pull the whole like, well, back in my day, because people that spin in the Cessna, right? The Cessna spins so slow. Like, but the 20 is what I spun in when I was going through the program, and the 20 just snaps. It just goes. It's so crazy, man. And you're in like,
if you all haven't seen the 20s, we just got new ones.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, we just added 2 new. I don't know even if you know this, Morgan. We just added 2 new DA20s to our fleet, which we're going to be using for spin training and commercial stage 1 stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Confidence.
Where was I? Flying with my dad. Yeah, there was no passion, and then
wait. Where was I? Okay, so flying with there was zero passion at all. Still isn't.
I finally did find my passion for it, but it was only after I made my own journey and did it myself. Previously, I got my private, and my dad had a Warrior. I got my private done, the rest of my private done in a Warrior, and it was the same thing. I'm like, I'm getting it done because I'm able to, but that's the only reason. But it was also because he was supporting me in that way. And I think whenever I pulled the trigger, I got the loan. I didn't have anyone co-sign. I was like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm going to Blue Line, and I'm doing this myself. This is for me.
Right.
No one is helping me do it. And so when I came to Blue Line, by myself, and I realized that like this is my path, and I'm doing this for me. It did become a passion, and so I'm really grateful that it happened that way. Sometimes you find out what you're passionate about when you do it on your own. You just make it happen, and that made all of the difference for me.
Yeah, like this is so cheesy, but it's like all those Disney movies where the dad's like, no, you're gonna play professional baseball, and it's like High School Musical, right? And he's like, no, I want to sing. I want to sing. and of course, he's not going to be passionate about something that his dad is telling him to do. But once you do it for yourself, that's different. Like you find your own, just like you said, you find your own passion.
At what point in the program would you say that it kind of, what they always say is that the bug bit you, right? Like, when do you think that happened for you? Or even can you even put a point, like a time that even occurred?
I can't really put a point on it. I'd say it happened fairly quickly. Just moving in and like getting your stuff set up, and we had. I guess I had 2 roommates, so we had the whole house to ourselves. Because at that point, we were still in Raleigh, out of the houses, and there were no women. It was me, Courtney, and Amy, and that was it. So anyway, when I moved in and got settled, and then finally started going to like ground school and had the first several flights, I was like, oh, we're doing this. Like, it's happening.
I don't know if this is a relatable experience for you, but I've talked about this in the past about how aviation hasn't necessarily ever been a passion for me. It felt it had its levels of intimidation going through the program, because I was surrounded by people who joined Blue Line who were passionate. It is their life. Aviation is their life, kind of thing. Yeah. And there was some level of intimidation because of that. Do you think you experienced the same thing from that?
No, I don't feel like it did. But the funny thing is, the thing that really got me was the fact that I was 20, I think I was 28 when I started the program. What got to me was the fact that I'm surrounded by 19 and 20-year-olds. It was so upsetting. I'm like, all you kids have your life together, and I'm finally getting mine together at 28. So that was probably the thing that got to me. It didn't, it wasn't intimidating or anything. Mostly I was annoyed because I was off doing my own thing when I was 19, 20, and like having fun with, I think I joined like rugby when I was 20 or 21, and just having fun with the team and like traveling. We traveled for tournaments. So like I enjoyed it. And also I was traveling with Southwest because I had the flight benefits. So I was beat bopping around by myself in Mexico, not doing I mean, it was good and it was fun, and there were a lot of, life lessons that I learned traveling by myself, but I wasn't focused on my career. And now I get to Blue Line. I'm 28, almost 29, and there's a 19-year-old just like, here we go.
That's how it was for me. I mean, I was 31, I think, when I joined the program, or 32 maybe. And yeah, it's the same thing. It's nuts seeing all these kids that go in. Like I joined the military, right? So maybe that's other people's perspective. I went into service right when I turned 18. But it's crazy being here, seeing these kids come in at 18, 19, 20 years old, and they start becoming a pilot like immediately. That's not even
career pilot.
Yeah.
Like they're so focused on their future that's
like they're already starting.
Right.
That's even when I joined the military, I didn't even consider a career. Like I wasn't thinking about that. I was just like, that's just what you're supposed to do. And it's crazy that, I don't know, being a pilot wasn't even something I even considered at that age. Like it just seemed, I don't know, like a bridge too far. So
like, do I really want to join whenever the regionals are paying $17,000 a year? Now, and that was the other thing for me.
Right.
I'm like, maybe I didn't have
now they're paying $100 an hour.
Yep. So they're a lot more motivated, and obviously the industry is ripe for the taking, and these kids are in it at the perfect time. There's no better time to start flying. So maybe 10 years ago for us, like it wasn't great. So maybe that has something to do with it too.
So what type of plane does your dad have right now?
Right now
Bonanza.
he's got the Banana A36.
Okay. What kind of avionics does he have in it?
I think it's got a G530, and he's got a couple of, I think they're 275s. They're a couple of like little touchscreen Garmin. They have the synthetic vision on it. They're super cool, but you can like scroll up and change to heading mode and GPSS and all that. But they're really neat. But it's not the G1000. I got real spoiled in Blue Line.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm asking, Morgan, and I know Andy knows, is because today's episode is sponsored by Sparkchasers Aircraft Services. Sparkchasers is an avionics company right here at Johnston Regional Airport. So the cool thing about Sparkchasers is that they are an avionics company who takes the stress out of choosing your upgrade for you. Deciding on panel upgrades can be an overwhelming task. Would you agree?
yeah.
GI this, GTX that. Who really knows what you need? I'll tell you who. Sparkchasers Aircraft Services. If you already have some of the pieces, we can work with you as well. Guess what? If you get signed up before the end of February, you're going to get special pricing for 2023. So give them a call today and get the modern cockpit you deserve.
One, Ashley, you're ridiculous, but it was amazing.
Was that good though?
But that
was good? That was a good little segue, huh?
That was amazing.
I knew what kind of plane her dad had. I knew it.
Goose is like chasing his tail around us and like slamming into the wall, and we're doing our best to like.
He's like, and David's little head is coming over. He's like, what are you doing?
That's short.
So Morgan, tell me about AUGAA.
I'm keeping that in there.
That's why she made it that. So that when we go to OshKosh, people could do the call sign and she would know.
Yes.
That's
Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You can
I am?
all to each other.
She's like, yes.
Yes.
Annie, I think her handle's like Pilot Annie or something. She's out in our friends in Canada. So she invited me to I guess a party at one of the avionics tents or something. And we go out there and we're just having a good time. And it started off as a joke. I'm like, what if I'm like, I'm just an awkward person. And I remember there were, people coming up to me at OshKosh. They're like, hi, Morgan. And I was telling them this. I'm like, I sometimes don't know how to act. Just like, hi. Like, I'm just a little. And then we decided, like, well, most aviators are a little bit awkward. And it just sort of snowballed. I was like, this would be like really fun to run with. And then I got home from OshKosh and then did a poll. I'm like, hey, what if we actually make a group? What would it be called? Awkward Aviators, or, the APA, Awkward Pilots Association. I'm like, well, that's already taken. And one of my followers, I did a poll, and one of them was like, what about AUGAA, the Association of Unsociable and Generally Awkward Aviators? Yes.
Nailed it.
Anything better myself. That's beautiful. And then we decided, I guess a donkey and pinup would be a good mascot. Yeah, so that it snowballed, and we ran with the idea, and it's just a fun. I don't even know how it happened. It's just.
So how does one join this group? Like, what does that look like? Or do they just buy your apparel and they're a part of it?
I guess get some merch if you then you're in the club, or just send me your most awkward story. Somebody tagged me in a story the other day. He was in an FBO and goes to wash his hands, and you know how a lot of the nice FBOs have a big bottle of mouthwash? He thought it was soap, so he squirted it in his hands and goes to wash his hands.
I don't understand how that's not common. I've done that so many times. It's ridiculous. That was new. I had never seen that before I moved to North Carolina. I had never seen mouthwash as a thing next to the soap. I've just never seen that. And on multiple occasions, I accidentally washed my hands with that.
We used to have mouthwash at the pilot training center.
Yeah, we did.
At RDU.
Yeah.
I did it too. So do we get shirts?
I'll just send them to you.
We get registration numbers now, right?
Guys are just part of the club, honestly. I don't know. It would be super funny to make it an actual club. I have no idea what goes into that.
Make it a nonprofit.
Right? Yeah, that way we can do that. But set up a booth at OshKosh, and then we can all just stand around after hours and not talk to each other and just be generally awkward.
You know what? You really should get something made so that we can put it on our booth at OshKosh, so it could be like a meetup spot for AUGAA. Actually, I might put a little thing on our hospitality tent that says it, because we're obviously going to have Low and Slow and Sparkchasers, shout out, and that would be awesome.
That would be super fun.
All right, we'll circle back because nobody else is saying yes.
I'm saying it's perfect. David's like, yes, do it. Let's talk about something. Because we have polarizing opinions on this subject. At least there are people here that have polarizing opinions on this subject. Is the 1,500-hour rule. So initially we had talked about this, which by the way, Abdul was our last guest, and he was also brought in from Blue Line because of you. Did you watch Abdul's? Oh no, because it's not released. We haven't released it yet.
Awkward.
So anyways, Abdul came here because of you, if you don't know that. The subject is about the 1,500-hour rule. And I don't know, Ashley's opinion may have changed on this. We'll see. But we had briefly brought it up in Abdul's podcast. And you had expressed the opinion that you disagree with the 1,500-hour rule, or that it shouldn't exist. What would you say your initial expression? If you were going to explain to somebody what your opinion of the 1,500-hour rule is, what would you tell them?
So I wrote about, like I said, my capstone project when I finished my bachelor's was on the shortage, and a huge reason we're dealing with the shortage right now is in part because of the 1,500-hour rule. It was sort of it was a knee-jerk reaction by the FAA after the Colgan air crash in 2009, right? The first officer in the Colgan air crash, I think, had over 3,000 hours. I think both her and the captain had
They both had over 1,500 hours.
The hours weren't the problem. I think, a big part of the problem was fatigue. I think she had traveled. I think she had deadheaded over to wherever she was based at, and had fallen asleep in the crew lounge or something. And they had talked about it in the NTSB report that fatigue was a major issue in this or potentially a major issue. And anyway, so I think the 1,500-hour rule was a knee-jerk reaction. I think it's good for us because now the regionals aren't. She was getting paid, I think, not even quite $17,000 the previous year. That's horrible.
So I think what's crazy about that is when we bring up the 15-hour rule, it's always the idea of hey, you need that many hours in flight to be able to be experienced enough to fly people around. And this is what I brought up in Abdul's podcast there was a time that people would get to 250 hours and they just immediately transitioned into the airlines, right? That was just what it was. Now, the debate was, because you initially were for the 1,500-hour rule. From hearing what Morgan has just said and what we talked about with Abdul's, what's your opinion now on it?
Okay, so hear me out. I feel like I was for the 1,500-hour rule because of lack of knowledge. So I feel like I came into it thinking I knew so little about the crash. I still don't. I didn't know that those pilots had over 3,000 hours. And I didn't know that fatigue was where did they get 1,500? If these pilots had 3,000 hours, why did they decide 1,500 was the rule? Why wouldn't they say they have to have 3,000?
Well, yeah.
I don't understand.
Welcome to the aggravation of the subject, right?
I was going to say, I think there were a couple of other crashes before Colgan, and I think Colgan was the tipping point. So I don't know about crashes, but I think there were a couple of regional crashes that also, sort of led to the issue or the 1,500-hour rule.
Gotcha. Well, to play devil's advocate also, though, I tend to feel, is the pilot shortage really due to the 1,500-hour rule? There are a lot of other factors that go into play with this. I mean, you think about the fact that we had a worldwide pandemic it's still going on right now.
But the shortage was happening before the pandemic.
Right, but it got worse because then just like you said earlier in the podcast, Morgan, then you had companies letting pilots retire early and not thinking about the future, thinking about when things ramp back up and people are ready to travel again, they're going to be ready to travel with a vengeance. And now we took our pilot shortage even further because we don't have enough people to fill the spots of the people that retired, And then also, was it a lack of preparation on the airlines for years to prepare for this?
So my perspective on it is the 1,500-hour rule, when it was implemented, because it was implemented, do you remember what year it was implemented?
Let me do some research.
11 or 12, I think. I think it took a couple years.
It was early 2010s.
Yeah.
So when that was implemented, that's where I saw where pre-COVID, when we had the pilot shortage then, that was an effect from the 1,500-hour rule. This is before COVID happened and everything. So there was already an issue. And then COVID hit, which just exaggerated that issue. Similar to what you were talking about, when you were working at Southwest and how you were dealing with people and the small little things got exaggerated because of COVID. And I think it's the same thing with this 1,500-hour rule.
2013.
So 2013.
And this article does say the crash happened in 2009.
Yeah.
And it killed 50 people. So the 1,500-hour rule was in response to that specific crash, even though both pilots of the regional turboprop plane had hundreds more hours in flying experience above that threshold. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit of a mind twister a little bit right there. Why are you making this rule when the people who were flying it already had that rule? The crash would not have changed.
I would say they all had, well over 1,500 hours. Also because no one, or a lot of people who, in this environment would love to fly, a lot of them didn't, back then because the regionals were paying so poorly. And a lot of the pilots that did go to the regionals had, if they were women, maybe they had a support system at home or they had 2 salaries or something, but it's obviously very difficult to live on less than 20,000, but they were, 16,000 a year. So I think there weren't as many people flying just because they knew that their return on investment, you spend 80 to 100 grand on training, all to go to the regionals and get paid 20 for, a few years,
right?
Or first couple. And then struggle to upgrade through the regionals, and then you would spend 7, 8 or more years until you could upgrade to captain, and then you'd have to do that until you could get a spot in a legacy. So many people didn't want to deal with it. The return on investment was horrible.
I think what would be interesting is to look at how other countries were affected, because America, from my understanding, I don't know if this is completely true, but from my understanding, America is the only one that has the 1,500-hour rule. Every other country supposedly still does the second they get their training done, they have the commercial license that they can go into it. And if that's the case, it's were they experiencing a pilot shortage? And if they were, was that affected by other elements? And America was dealing with the same elements the rest of the world was, but we just decided to tack on an additional problem of the 1,500-hour rule, right? And then COVID happened and made it that much more worse.
That's it.
That much worse.
Wow, that's such a good point. So further research leads me to find that Europe and even Canada, there's a minimum of 230 or 250 hours flying respectively. So once you have your commercial license, essentially, you can go fly for the airlines. The title of this is The 1,500-Hour Rule Has Broken the Pilot Pipeline in the U.S.
Yeah, and even Forbes wrote an article about this. They deep dive the 1,500-hour rule.
Forbes.com.
Oh, that's literally what you're reading from? That's so funny. I was going to say, literally, Forbes wrote an article about this. So, Morgan, okay, I want your opinion on this. All right, so we agree that the 1,500-hour rule, we agree that the 1,500-hour rule is a little too much. Do you think it should drop back down to 250?
No, because I think that's the biggest reason that we're actually seeing the regionals be forced to cough up some money to pay their pilots a livable wage. So going back to 250, no. I mean, maybe like 750, 1,000. I think 1,500 is a bit much. But, you know, especially when you think of maybe you've got a pilot who's literally just flying the just beating up the pattern with, you know, students. And obviously there's more to instructing than that. But, you know, if that's all they're doing for 1,500 hours, how much experience are they really getting? Because, I mean, not that there are many people just doing, you know, laps in the pattern for 1,500 hours. But there's probably a few out there who are like, well, all they need is 1,500 hours. We're just going to go in circles. Or, you know, they're not really, you know, they're not doing, I mean, obviously they have to do some cross countries, but they're not growing, you know, their foundation of knowledge, I guess, and their experience foundation by going to other places, you know, flying in IFR, just different kinds of flying. You know, they're not forced to be in that situation. So
I had brought up to when we were talking to Abdul, I was like, I felt good with 750. 750 seemed right? And it's very arbitrary for me to just choose that number. But
what was it before?
250.
Oh, so it was 250 and they raised it to 1,500?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying. 750 was the happy medium. Abdul brought up a really good point that what should be mandatory is that you choose how you build your additional 250 hours after flight school, right? Whether it's instructing or something else. Because most instructors find that their job gets a little repetitive after about 200-300 hours, right? At that point, systems start getting into play. You're getting in the flow of things. But then he says that you should transfer over to a 135 operation. And then from 500 to 750, you now have to have commercial experience. So you're dealing
on the job
training, essentially.
Right.
So you're actually having to do crew resource management. It's you and a first officer, or actually you and a captain. And then you can transition into the airlines. And I thought that was a pretty decent idea.
Honestly, that's where I'm planning on going next is a 135 because, I mean, although the pipeline, I like my job. I don't like that I get airsick sometimes, but you know, and I have learned the different, you know, weathered patterns from flying from Houston to Midland, but I make that same trip every week. Right. So there's only so much more that I'm able to learn. So, but yeah, no, I want to go to a 135. I'm like, let me get into an actual jet and learn, you know, flying with a crew. Like it's a different environment. And obviously if you want to fly commercially, like that's the experience that really matters. And this experience is important too. And obviously, but the hours are more important than anything. So it doesn't matter where you got your hour. They don't care if you beat up the pattern for 1,000 hours. They're like, we'll take you, whatever. So yeah, I think getting in a crew environment, flying a jet, flying turbines is so much more valuable.
Okay, Morgan. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and transition to questions. There's so much more that we want to talk to you about. And I guess what we'll have to do is we'll have to do a part 2 for sure.
We're going to have to because if we don't eat soon,
there
won't be able to be a part 2.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and transition into questions that people had for you.
The first question is from Jacob Morphonios. And his question is, who was your favorite instructor at Blue Line Aviation and why was it me?
Because you let me start filming content with you and didn't shame me.
I love Jacob. Jacob is working at an airline in Hawaii, actually. So he lived in Hawaii, moved here for flight school, instructed with us for about a year and a half, and then moved back to Hawaii with his wife, who I also love. She worked with us as a training advisor, and I just love them both so much.
Yeah, he went to Hawaii to island hop. Like that's one of like the prime time building jobs you can get as a pilot is to island hop in Hawaii all day.
But now he's a captain. Like he's doing it less, I believe, than less for our building, and like really enjoys it.
Yeah.
How could you not?
Right. In Hawaii, of all places. Come on.
Right. I mean, how are you going to fly around the islands all day and say you hate this? Just to be clear, he doesn't.
See, we had a question from someone on Instagram by the name of Ashton_SZ. What's the best job to build hours for someone who just received their commercial rating?
I think pipeline is pretty good. You can do banner towing. I like having my CFI. Obviously I didn't use it for very long. I don't think being a CFI is for everybody. I think that's an important conversation to have with yourself, because when you think about the responsibilities that you as a CFI you have, like it's a lot, and you're teaching people, if you're teaching private, most of these people have never been in an airplane in their life. So if you plan on getting your CFI just to build hours and just to show up for that, and that's it, you're failing your students, right? You have to show up, you have to be able to answer all their questions, and there's so much more that goes into it, right? Like outside of flying, and you have to be prepared to step in to that. And if you're not passing on the right knowledge to your student, then you're just doing them a huge disservice, especially considering how much they're paying to be there. And also the fact that you're teaching them things that are probably going to save their life one day. And that's the big, if you drop the ball there, you have the potential to, really hurt somebody, or for them to, maybe lose their life. So that's such an important responsibility. And I don't think anyone who's not ready to take that on, who doesn't think they're going to be able to give 110% to every student, that's not for you. Just don't do it. People who get the rating and maybe they don't like instructing, but they understand that responsibility and they're still going to show up. That's a different story. Not everybody loves instructing. I did not love instructing, and then the pipeline thing just fell in my lap. It is what it is. But if you don't like instructing, but you're still able to show up and give everything to your students, then great. But if not, then that's a different story.
So 2 things. The first thing is I respect that you were able to come to that decision and just be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Also, do you feel like, because we have some students that are here that say they want to go through our program, but maybe they know they're not interested in being a CFI. And the honest truth of it is, do you believe, because I believe this, do you believe that becoming a CFI helped you grow as a pilot? Having to then teach that information and go through that check ride and everything, do you feel like it helped you become a better pilot?
I think so, yeah, because there's something different about not only taking in the information and being able to perform, but also your ability to give that information to someone else and then their ability to perform, right? So I think it makes a difference. Yeah, I think I'm very glad that I have it, even though I'm not using it anymore. I'm very glad that I have my CFI.
Okay, and then the second thing was, so going back to the 1,500 hour rule, as a CFI, you are instructing people who will be flying airlines one day, if that's their goal, or any plane.
Yeah.
And just like you said, to reiterate, it's so important that you're right. You don't have to love what you're doing. Hopefully you do. But it's so important that you take in how important what you're doing is, because, when you teach a private student, they're going to take that information, and that's like the basis of their pilot training, right? And as when they become an airline pilot, that's still going to be with them. So it's not something to be taken lightly.
No.
But also, it's a really good experience to go through, because having to teach the information will help you be a better pilot.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think to add on, one of the common things we get asked a lot at Blue Line is, do we guarantee the instructor position? And no, we don't. And this, because of this conversation, is the exact reason why. We vet everybody. We always tell people that come through our program to treat it like it's a job, because you're being watched the whole time. We monitor our students as they go through the program, and we treat it like a job interview. So we watch how they, like what they do and how they do things, what their personality is like throughout the program. And not everybody not only wants to be a pilot, some people just aren't built or not pilot.
Yeah, I was going to say, take that out.
Not everybody wants to become an instructor, nor can everybody become an instructor. Some people just aren't built to teach, right? And that's why we don't guarantee the position, because to maintain the quality of training that we provide, we have to vet those that come into the instructor ranks at Blue Line.
I would say, it's funny enough, I had a conversation yesterday with someone who messaged me who's looking into Blue Line, and they were like, well, I hear they only hire maybe 40% of their students that go through the program. Like, I was hoping to have a for sure job. I'm like, well, honestly, that benefits the students so much, because if you or whatever flight school, whoever guarantees every pilot a job, like, you don't know who you're getting, right? You're going to have some people that come in who get the CFI just to build hours, and they don't care about anything else, and they don't care about you as a student. They just want to get their hours. So those people aren't going to be the best instructor, potentially, if that's all they're motivated by. So you guys have an awesome opportunity to keep an eye on these students for 5 to 6 months and monitor their progress, and see, do they show up every day? Do they dress nice? Do they treat everybody nicely? Are they a good person? Like, you can typically,
are they prepared?
Right. Yeah. Well, like, do they come? Do they have the homework done, before they get in on the first day? They're showing up every day, and you guys have the opportunity to spend, 5 to 6 months with these people just about every day. You get a pretty good idea of what you're getting when you spend that much time with people. Obviously, you interview people and bring people from out of town. You have a couple hour interview, maybe, 2 separate interviews, but these students you get 6 months with. So it's awesome, because you really get the pick of the litter, and in return, those good people that you guys decide to hire are going to bring the best for the next students. So anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's really great that you guys get to do that, and it really benefits students, because they're going to get good instructors and just good quality instruction. So
an Instagram account, which you should well know, me and Hugh, asked the question, who's the coolest Southwest employee and why is it Nicole?
Obviously Nicole, because you should check out her page. I worked with her for years, and she has amazing photography. The Southwest jets are known for their pretty slick paint jobs. So she gets some really cool shots, and it was a pleasure working with her, and we still, connect every once in a while, and she's still in Houston. So yes, Nicole.
So she inspired our recent, we call them, internally, we call them lifestyle snippets, but she films these behind the scenes employee videos of guys on the ramp and stuff like that. And I love them. I don't know what it is about that content, but I love it. And we recently posted one, and I'm just a huge fan of it. And David actually edited that one, and it was really good. I loved it. I didn't know her name was Nicole. I just always said it was me and Hugh, but thanks.
This question is from Instagram from Crec79. How many AUGAA members, and is there an award for the most awkward aviator?
There should be. This might be a project for the future. It just started as like, hey, let's create a mascot. This would be a fun idea, but that's about as far as I've gotten with it. So maybe one day in the future, I would love to have an award for the most awkward aviator.
And how many members are there?
I couldn't tell you.
Because it's not like it's real in a way.
Great question.
So there's a question from Meme Aviation, or Meme_Aviation. After your time at Blue Line, what did you do to begin your time building?
I started off with instructing. I can't remember how many months I was doing that. Like I said, it wasn't for really long, but I started instructing, and then the pipeline gig just fell in my lap, and I ran with that because I was, as an instructor, I was working, I think, 6 days a week. It was like my schedule had to be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I could have 1 flight a day. I could have 5 flights a day. I could have 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and nothing in between. So that schedule, I really wasn't a fan of that schedule. I didn't have any time for anything outside of that, pretty much. And so when the pipeline fell in my lap, I think we typically fly 3 days a week. So, and we fly about 15 hours a week, give or take. So I was flying a little bit more consistently, it's because Houston weather here is nuts. And then you have, slow I think January was really slow for the flight school that I was at. Or I'm sorry, I think December was really slow for the flight school that I was working for. So I have a salary, I've got a consistent schedule, and I have time for life. so that's what I'm doing right now. But like I said, I'm trying to get on with a 135 because I'm tired of throwing up.
So this next question was already pretty much answered, but it's from Austin Trout 1, said, what made you use delay in front of her tag? But then they also asked, what is the coolest plane that you've ever flown? The 42.
The 42.
Are you kidding me? She flew in an aerobatic plane at OshKosh.
I mean, that's pretty cool. That was fun. But that's a real toss-up. But it also depends on the kind of flying you're doing, right? You
right.
Want to like cruise and get somewhere. Even the 40, they're both just sweet airplanes. Yeah, but it's pretty darn cool too. I love the Citabria. That's what I'm flying for Pipeline, but it is not the right plane from Houston to Midland. It's like a 5.5 to 7 hour day, depending on the winds. It really, a 172 would probably be best. A 182 would be even better. But I love the Citabria, just not for long trips.
So this last question is from TikTok. It's from Zad Alfala7. I love this person because they give us a question every time on TikTok.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I feel like I just haven't recognized that. Sorry.
So this person wants to know, how does your financing system work? So Zad, you can go on our website and you can check out the financing page or connect with a training advisor and we can tell you all about it. But specifically, Morgan, what I'd like you to go into on this is, did you use our financing? And since you did you refinance afterwards? And since you did, who did you refinance through? And just how that process worked for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, it took 3 days after I had seen Andy's video. I think 3 days later, or within 3 days, I applied for the loan, and then 2 weeks later, I pulled the trigger. It was a very borderline impulsive decision, but as soon as
was it Skybound?
Yeah, it was Skybound. Mm-hmm. So I applied with Skybound, accepted, and then came to school 2 months later, 2.5 months later, and I mean the process was pretty easy. I didn't get a fantastic interest rate initially, but I think that's a hang up for a lot of people whenever they apply for the loan. They're like, okay, I'll consider maybe getting a loan, and then they look at the interest rate and they're like, well, now I'm not going to get this loan because that interest rate's too high. I'm like, okay, I get it. It's a very intimidating interest rate, and especially when you compound it and you really look at how much you're paying. Yeah, it's discouraging, but you can refinance. And unfortunately, interest rates are just up as a whole right now, but I graduated. I refinanced as soon as I got a job at the flight school I was teaching at. I refinanced with Earnest, and I think my interest rate right now is 3.6%, but you can refinance. And although, that initial interest rate is a little bit high, grand scheme of things, you're going to be potentially making millions in the aviation industry.
Right. And that's the thing about our financing or financing for flight school in general. The thing to consider is that when you're going through flight school, you're unemployed, or a flight school like ours specifically, because there was no way for you to have a job when you're going through the most efficient flight school in the nation. Mm-hmm. Shout out. So seriously though, you don't have a job. So when you're financing, these companies, you may not get the best interest rate. You don't have a job, you're about to go through flight school. When you're finished and you are now employed in an industry that, just like you said, has the opportunity for the workers to make millions of dollars, and the return on investment is so much higher, these refinance companies it's a no-brainer for them once you're employed. So it sounds scary in the beginning, but if you think about your long-term goal and the reason you're going to flight school, even, you're interested and it's expensive, right? So it really isn't as daunting as it seems, because once you are employable or employed, the hiring rate right now is over 90% for instructors, pilots. So refinancing it should not be a problem. And obviously Morgan is a a good example of that.
Yeah, I think what people seem to misunderstand, you look at anybody that is in any investment world, and this is exactly what it looks like. There's capital, massive capital up front, but the returns are what you're looking at, right? Which is why we call it ROI, return on investment. So looking on that is one aspect. But even for us, our students, our graduates are breaking the 6-figure income barrier within 3 to 5 years of graduating the program. Actually, even from starting the program.
I think it's even sooner than that.
And that's definitely the case because we've had somebody that recently joined the regionals. So it's only been 3 years since they've gone through the program and they're already making over $100,000 a year. So it's like you're making your return on investment. In collaboration with the refinancing your loan to lower your payments, your cash flow is just that much higher.
Right.
So,
it depends on like how aggressively you're trying to fly and get your hours. So I'm flying about 50 hours a month, which is a little bit on the low side for some people, but I like it because I was burnt out at Southwest and I don't want to burn out, especially in aviation, before I like really make my career. So, but there was another guy flying pipeline. He's flying like 200 hours a month. I mean, he just broke 1,500 hours, but you know, he was getting after it. Like you can get that money at the regionals like fairly quickly. Like if you're ready to put in the work and you want to go, you know, bust your butt. Or you can take your time a little bit, you know, like I am, and, you know, get your, 50, 60 hours a month and then, go to a 135 or, make it all the way to the regionals. But yeah, like you said, you can get there very quick. Even if you don't get to the regionals, a lot of 135s are starting their first officers. You get hired maybe around 1,000, 1,200 hours, give or take. A lot of them are starting between 60 and like 90,000.
That doesn't include bonuses or anything. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and roll out the red carpet for you. Is there anything you'd like to say to our followers and anything you got going on that you'd like them to know about?
So let me get on my little red carpet, my little pedestal real quick. So, like I said, there's that one pipeline pilot flying 200 hours a month. There's me flying 50 hours a month. I had this realization the other day because I'm currently really impatient. Like I like flying the amount of hours I'm flying a month, but at the same time, I'm so ready to move on to a jet, right? That's the goal for most of us, not everybody, but like, I don't want to be a pipeline pilot for the remainder of my career, and my stomach would murder me in my sleep anyway. So I'm struggling a little bit with feeling, like sick and just being impatient and ready to move on. And I just wanted to share with people that, like, if you're feeling the same way, if you're not building hours as quickly as you want to, or if you're, flying 80, 100 hours a month and maybe you're just tired, just keep at it. Like, you're not the only one. We're all, and also for people that are coming in or, maybe thinking about flight school and then thinking it's going to be a breeze all the way to regionals. It's not always a breeze, right? Like, I'm enjoying the journey, or I'm trying to enjoy the journey as much as I can, but you're going to have days where it's rough, right? I had a flight maybe a month ago. I threw up twice on my way to Midland. I was so miserable, and I was like ready to quit. I almost sent in my resignation. I was like, this might be the day. I don't think I can do this anymore. But I stuck it out and I worked past the air sickness. It happens occasionally, but it's not always going to be smooth sailing, and that's okay. Just be prepared that you might have to pay your dues for a couple of years. That's okay. Just, keep your head down. If you got a little bit of grit and fortitude, like, you can make it. We're going to get there. And this is a reminder to myself as well. Like, be a little bit patient. Like, the return on investment is there. It takes a little bit of time. Sometimes it feels like a trudge, but hang in there. Like, it's all going to be worth it in the end. So that's what I got for you.
That's so motivational. I love it. So, Morgan, why don't you tell our listeners how they can contact you if they want to reach out to you?
Instagram is probably the best place. My handle is Lay Captain Morgan, the Lay _Captain Morgan. That's the best place to find me. I'm not on TikTok or anything. I think I deleted my TikTok, actually. I started posting stuff. Man, I got so overwhelmed, posting both places and trying to respond to. It was too much.
Well, Morgan, it was great having you on the podcast. I'm glad you joined us. We look forward to having part 2 and actually having you here physically in the studio.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. I think we're going to have to arrange that soon because you all can't see our script, but there's so many things we didn't get into because
we're already at 2 hours.
The three of us with Morgan, we could just talk forever. So,
Okay, well, Morgan, appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
bye, Morgan. So don't forget that we still are offering our career pilot program discount of $5,000 off until the end of February. When you mention the Bravo Lima podcast.
Make sure you follow us and watch us on any platform that you prefer to watch our podcast on. And if you prefer listening, make sure you listen on any of the major platforms, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and you can join us there as well. Remember to always check the description of the video because we might have updates or corrections about anything that we might have stated during the podcast. And that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap up the podcast. Skies are clear. Comms are open.
No, comms are closed.
Oh yeah, comms are closed. I'll start that again. Skies are clear.
You still got to put it in there.
We're never going to get this outro right. Skies are clear. Comms are closed. Thank you for watching the Bravo Lima Podcast.
Episode 3.
Three.
Bye.